This is the Remington Model 11, which for most purposes is the same as the Browning Auto-5, the world's first semi-automatic shotgun. Designed in 1898 by John Moses Browning, patented 1900 and introduced 1902, this weapon was in production for the next 96 years. Its general layout, bottom loading, tube feeding, and side ejecting, has influenced the design of most repeating shotguns for more than 100 years. This layout is also seen in the weapon's predecessor, the Winchester Model 1897 slide action, also designed by Browning. The story of this weapon's production is legendary. Browning first took the design to Winchester, who, in one of the biggest blunders in business history, turned it down, thus ending Browning's years-long association with Winchester. Browning next took the design to Remington, whose president dropped dead of a heart attack while Browning was waiting outside his office. Finally, Browning took the design to FN in Belgium, where it was introduced in 1902. The design finally did return to the United States and Remington 3 years later. This Remington version was produced from 1905 to 1948, with about 850,000 units made. An estimated 3 million were made by FN under the Browning name. Some have doubtless been passed down through 3 or even 4 generations and continue to serve in hunting fields worldwide. According to serial number charts on the internet, this one in my hands was made in 1910. Over a century old, it still works. Combat versions have also been made, such as this one seen at the OregonArms Collectors show in Portland, Oregon, or these seen at the Buffalo Bill Historical Center in Cody, Wyoming. Note the barrel shroud and bayonet lug. Since this is a recoil-operated design, the bayonet cannot be mounted directly to the barrel. This video will cover basic operation from the user's point of view. As stated, this design is recoil-operated, so it is very important to never allow anything to interfere with the movement of the barrel. Let's begin as usual with identification of the major features. I'll start with the manual safety because it requires more explanation. So many Auto-5s and Model 11s have been made for so many years that there have been several variations. This photo of a friend's 3 shotguns illustrates some of those differences. A Garand-type safety through the front of the trigger guard, note the Glock-type activation lever. A different type of sliding safety inside the trigger guard, the one usually encountered on the Remington. And a button at the rear of the trigger guard found on most later production. Typically for the sliding types, back is on safe and forward is off safe. For the button type, as demonstrated with this 1022, the button pushed to the right is on safe and pushed to the left by a right-handed shooter is off safe. Now let's look at the rest of the controls. The trigger, the carrier latch, the bolt handle, the ejection port, the loading port, the carrier, and the magazine tube. The primary operational difference between the Model 11 and the Auto-5 is the magazine cutoff, here on the left side of the receiver on the Browning, but omitted on the Remington. When this is turned forward, the weapon operates normally as a semi-automatic repeater. When this is turned back, the magazine is held in reserve and the weapon operates as a self-ejecting single shot. Now let's examine how to unload and make safe a weapon of this type. For this demonstration, I'm using dummy cartridges I made without powder or primers. First, always keeping the weapon pointed in a safe direction and fingers away from the trigger as much as possible, engage the manual safety. The Remington safety can be engaged even if the internal hammer is not cocked. Whenever possible, avoid cycling live rounds through the action, as this greatly increases the risk of negligent discharge. The manuals I've found for the Auto-5 and Model 11 instruct the user to do exactly that, but it goes against my principles. The following is the method I've discovered. First, look through the loading port to see if there are any cartridges in the magazine. If not, pull the bolt all the way back. When the magazine is empty, the bolt will lock back, after extracting and ejecting any cartridge which may be in the chamber. If there are cartridges in the magazine, slowly pull the bolt back just enough to see if there's a round in the chamber. If not, close the bolt again. If there is a round in the chamber, Pull the bolt back to extract and eject it, then hold the bolt back. The next cartridge will feed from the magazine onto the carrier. Slowly close the bolt just enough to cause the carrier to raise, at which point this next cartridge can be extracted and ejected. The bolt can now be carefully closed with the carrier raised and empty, therefore closing the bolt on an empty chamber. With the chamber empty, to remove cartridges from the magazine, press the carrier latch button and raise the carrier. The carrier is locked unless the carrier latch button is pressed. Then pull the bolt back just enough to release the cartridge from the magazine. Note how I hold my finger to catch and control the cartridge as it comes out of the magazine. This is repeated until all cartridges are removed, at which point the bolt can be pulled all the way back to lock. Later models of the Auto-5 do not require the carrier latch button to be pressed to release the carrier. I don't know if they made that change to later models of the Model 11. For handling and examination, leave the bolt locked open. For range safety, insert an open bolt indicator. For storage, after confirming that all ammunition has been removed from the weapon, both in the chamber and the magazine, restrain the bolt and press the carrier latch button, carefully lowering the bolt. Simply pressing the carrier latch button will cause the bolt to slam forward. It has considerable mass and is under considerable spring pressure. You must control the bolt. It probably won't damage the weapon if you simply drop the bolt, but it is very poor etiquette, and any fingers in the ejection port may be badly injured. Now let's see how to load a weapon of this type. If the bolt is locked back and a quick shot is required, simply drop one cartridge through the open ejection port and press the carrier latch button. I repeat, make sure your fingers are clear. To load the magazine, press and hold the carrier latch button, then press cartridges into the magazine tube, one at a time. Note how the cartridge will pop back about half an inch when you release the carrier latch button. The standard magazine holds 4 rounds, unless a plug is installed to limit capacity for hunting regulations. Extension tubes are also available for combat or competition use. If the magazine is loaded but the chamber is not, pull the bolt all the way back and let it fly forward under spring pressure. Drawing the bolt back will release 1 round from the magazine onto the carrier, and releasing the bolt will chamber that round. Another round may then be added to the magazine as before, for the full standard capacity of 5. To fire, aim, release the manual safety, and press the trigger in the usual way. The Browning Auto-5, Remington Model 11, and similar weapons use normal semi-automatic operation, meaning they fire 1 shot each time the trigger is pressed, extracting and ejecting the spent hull, and feeding the next cartridge from the magazine. This continues until all ammunition is spent, at which point the bolt will lock back. In closing, I will demonstrate a technique I've developed for rapidly loading the Model 11's magazine. I don't have shell caddies yet, and have not yet tried 3-gun competition, but I hope to someday with this weapon. To develop this method, I studied several YouTube videos of shotgun speed loading for competition, and I also remembered a key point from Jerry Micklick's revolver speed loading technique, in which he switches hands. That may also be a tutorial video in the future. First, it is simple to drop 1 round through the open ejection port and press the carrier latch button to release the bolt and chamber that round. Since this older Model 11 must have the carrier latch button pressed to release the carrier and allow access to the magazine, I can't use the weak hand technique I've seen many top competitors use. Instead, I transfer the weapon to my left hand and grab 4 cartridges with the right. I grasp the weapon by the receiver, bracing the butt on my waist. Press the carrier latch button to release the carrier. And insert 4 cartridges in the magazine as shown. The keys here are to hold the cartridges nearer the thumb side of the hand, to hold the first cartridge between the thumb and forefinger, and to make sure each cartridge goes all the way past the shell stops and not stopping at the locking block latch. If it stops here, you'll have to angle the cartridge more, which will slow down your reload. But if you go all the way past the shell stops, you can roll the next cartridge right into the ejection port without having to angle it. This is the kind of thing you really have to dry practice a lot, and dummy cartridges are a great help. If you fumble a cartridge, just let it go and get more from your carrier, wherever that happens to be. It's probably a safety violation under match rules to try to pick up the cartridge anyway. Modern shotguns have lifters, or carriers, which are not locked like this old Model 11, so you can use this technique with the weak hand, as I've seen all the top competitors do on YouTube. One video I found particularly useful was titled Army Pro Tips Shotgun Reloads. A-zoom snap caps are available in 12 gauge, but they may not have sufficient mass or the correct balance for this kind of dry practice. If you reload, or know someone who does, it's easy to make 12 gauge dummy rounds by leaving out the powder and primer. I used a styrofoam packing peanut in place of the powder to give tension to the plastic wad and shot column and to get a good crimp. This should conclude the basic operation of the Browning Auto-5 and Remington Model 11. Most weapons of this type will be operated in a similar way, will have similar controls, although the shape and location of those controls may differ. User's manuals for the Browning are still available on the Browning website, browning.com, under the Support tab, and vintage manuals for the Model 11 can be found elsewhere on the Internet. If you have any questions, please leave them in comments, and visit my website, jeffersonian.name, from which you can email me. Thank you for watching.